How's it going, everyone? VenomousStare here. Today I'm going to be bringing you a thing called Beginner's Basics. Basically, this is a StarCraft 2 series where I break down the very fundamentals of the game and explain it in a way that could help people understand how to play better, whether that be in Gold League or Bronze or maybe even Diamond. But a lot of these tips are going to be targeted towards the new players. And I'd like you to consider that even if you are reasonably high rank, Platinum, Diamond, you could consider that there are things about the game that you don't know yet, or hypothetically ways to think about the game that you don't know yet. So a lot of these things, especially in the beginning of the video, are going to be targeted towards brand new people who just freaking opened the box, and installed the disk. But let's get right into it. So StarCraft 2, everyone starts with the base. It's either a hatchery, command center, and nexus, and workers. The workers automatically mine, and then you have two gas geysers. With every race, you have to build a building onto the gas geysers to start harvesting the gas. In general, most people focus on expanding, which means making a new one of these bases in a new location early on in the game, at least once. Zerg, this race right here that you see, the bugs, as they're often called by new players, Zerg is the race that needs to expand the most in general, and the rule of thumb is Zerg usually wants to be a base up, like have an additional base ahead of their opponent. And the reason for this is because all of the Zerg's units come out of the hatchery, whereas, for instance, Terran, their main base that they start with, the command center, it just builds really workers. It doesn't build attacking units. They build other units like the barracks and the factory and the starport to make attacking units. So Zerg needs to have more hatcheries and more bases because their production is based around what they not only how much economy they have like the other races, but how many hatcheries they have, because their ability to produce fighting units and economy is bottlenecked by how many hatcheries they have. So it's something very important to note. Probably the most important thing about StarCraft 2, I would say, that people really underestimate is money and macro management. You hear this term all the time in casting games, especially professional games, macro and micro. Like this. So macro management is how you manage your economy and your bases and the big picture decisions that you make. For instance, in this game, I chose to take a fast expansion, make drones, more workers, to get a better economy and have my income grow so I can produce more units more rapidly. I also chose to get Zergling speed early and use my gas to tech to Baneling Nest and Lair. That's just kind of the basic overall outline. If you were to put my build order, which is kind of a fancy way of saying your plan and idea in game, build order is defined by what buildings you make at what supply. Supply is this number in the top right. So the first number of supply indicates your current unit. So I have 42 supply out of 52. That means if we go to units, the 33 drones, 3 queens, and 2 zerglings totals up to 42 supply. And the fact that I have 5 overlords and 2 hatcheries allocates me a possible 52 supply. The way supply works is this first number is what you have, and the second number is your limit. Your max limit is 200. That's everyone's max limit for every race. And in order to achieve this max limit, you have to build overlords, pylons, or depots. Basically, this is something that you have to continue to do the entire game and keep track of to ensure that you can continuously produce units, because if you cap out, like this Terran player just went to 53 out of 53, you see. So whenever he tries to build a new unit, he'll get supply blocked, which is just really, really bad. This is getting, see, notice he's building 3 depots at once to attempt to recover from his supply block. But if he were to try to produce any more units, he wouldn't be able to, because he's at 53 out of 53. This is why you see his barracks are idle, they're not producing any units, because he knows he's supply blocked. So why is getting supply blocked bad? Why are these two numbers saying the same thing bad? Well, getting supply blocked in StarCraft 2 is basically like being frozen. It's kind of a simplistic way to put it, but I'll explain. So in StarCraft 2, really the way that you're trying to win the game is you want to always constantly be building. Building an army, building your economy, upgrading, taking bases. You want to be continuously increasing your supply, and you never ever want to get supply blocked like you see the Zerg player Savagewood, that's me, getting blocked right now. Because look at this. If I wasn't supply blocked, I could be producing units. Right now, all of these drones are diligently working to gather me money, and I'm unable to spend it on subsequent units and more units because I was supply blocked. Now you see, because my overlords popped, they finished, and now I'm able to produce units because the second number, I think it was 66, now jumped up to 90. So I now can produce 7 Mutalisks, which are the next step in my build order. And your build order is just like the loose framework or idea that you want to try to go with. This game, basically the loose build order for me was take 3 bases, make lots of drones, make a Baneling nest, tech to lair, tech to spire, and go into Mutalisk, Zergling, and Baneling. Now I want to go back to micro and macro. Micro is how you control your units, specifically maximizing their worth based on very precise moves that really manipulate the way that your units move in such a way that minimizes the damage that you take from your opponent. In terms of micro, one of the most basic and common forms you see is Marine splitting versus Banelings. The idea here is you want to spread your Marine army out to minimize the splash damage they take. Another basic form of micro you see is whenever Mutalisk, Zergling, and Baneling, which is a very common Zerg composition versus Terran, fight the Terran opponent, the Mutalisk will be focus firing on Liberators and Medivacs, and the Zerglings and Banelings will be fighting the ground army. So the Zerglings are going to run in here and attack the main army. And look at this. See how Savagewood focuses the Medivacs? In StarCraft 2, if you don't want to overextend with your Mutalisks like this. Mutalisks are very valuable, and to run in and lose them like that is very bad. They're a harassing force that you want to keep alive. So that was a big mistake. Whenever Mutalisks are harassment units, so oftentimes you want to use them on workers. You kind of skirt in, attack your opponent's workers, and run away when they defend. And you can fight with them, but they have to have allies. They have to have something else and a unit composition to help them work as a cohesive unit, because Mutalisks alone are very bad for one-on-one engagement, straight up fights with these high DPS Marines and Liberators, because these Mutalisks only have 120 health. So that's why you see Mutalisks, they go out on their own and harass, but then they also fight with Zerglings and Banelings. So you can see Savagewood's micro there, the way that he controlled his Mutalisk was very bad. Because what he should have done after that initial attack right here is ran away, lived to fight with another day with his Mutalisk, replenish a ground army, and attack again. Instead, what he did was continue to do his attack after he had won, and then overcommit into this defensive position and lose his Mutalisk. However, now he has made more, and he needs to micro them better, control these Mutalisks better to try to gain a little advantage. So he snipes one SCV, and he's going to try to snipe the sensor tower. That's perfect. And see, he escapes without losing a muta. This is how you want to control your mutas. He sniped the sensor tower, which allowed him to not be seen. He's going to be able to harass much more freely now. Notice his opponent immediately rebuilt, but that's money that it cost him and an action that it cost him. So Savagewood, that's how you want to harass. You take one little advantage and then run away, but then you keep trying to take little advantages over and over and over. Notice Savagewood, the subsequent move in his build order was to make an infestation pit, tech up to Hive, and start to make the Ultralisks, so he has that Ultralisk cavern on the way. This is part of his macro, aka macro management and build order, because his idea was to go Mutalisk, Zergling, Baneling, and do mid-game pressure, and then and then tech, which is kind of a fancy way of saying advance upwards in your technology tree into Ultralisks. Notice also he's getting the Infestor upgrade, so whenever he builds Infestors, they will have the energy to use fungal growth right when they hatch, which is extremely important. Savagewood is going to run in here and micro his Zerglings to try to kill SCVs. It's important to try to limit your opponent's economy, and it's also important to do harass throughout the game, because really, especially at lower levels, if you harass your opponent and try to kill their workers, especially in 2 locations at once, if they don't react appropriately, they can sustain severe damage, and often game-ending damage. So you really can't underestimate harass and how powerful it is. So the next phase of Savagewood's build order, his macro, and his structure for how he wants to win the game and his win condition is teching up to the Ultralisk. He has 4 on the way. And this is something you should always ask yourself in StarCraft 2, not just with Zerg, but with also Terran and Protoss. What's my win condition? How do I myself see myself winning this game? What idea or unit composition or strategy am I going to go for that allows me to push for a win? And you can see Savagewood here, his win condition was to go Mutaling, Baneling, spread creep across the map to try to remain defensive. Look at all this creep spread across the map, so it's very hard for him to be caught off guard, and it's easier for him to defend these bases. Savagewood says, I want to tech up to the Ultralisk, I want to try to upgrade, get double upgrades, melee upgrading Carapace, and I want to harass. And you can see here at this point, he almost wants to trade off these mutas, which usually you almost never want to see this, but there's a very strong Terran defense, and he has a ton of money and a huge economy. He wants to make a lot more Ultras. So you almost never want to trade off mutas like this, but whenever you have a huge economy and greater Spire, you can tech to Broodlord. You want to make Corruptors because they're a more fighting, beefy structure. As far as unit composition goes, they're better backbone, straight-up fighters than Mutalisks are. But whenever you get such a big economy with so many bases that at some point you want to trade off units that are no longer useful to you. Mutalisks are not really like this. Usually Mutalisks are useful throughout the game, but once you get to super late game Zerg, whenever you have the full tech tree, sometimes they can lose their use, especially when you have economy this big. Roaches really are the more common unit of becoming worthless and out of date. This is another part of macro management. Once your ultras get low, you can run them back to your main and use the queens that will probably have access energy since they've been there the entire game to transfuse them. And suddenly you have very healthy ultras once again, and your Terran opponent, who will constantly be trying to set up defensive positions, it's very hard once you get to ultras for Terran to deal with it. Notice this guy intelligently has building walls, has liberators, has ghosts. This guy was actually in Masters League, I believe. But look at this, Corruptors aren't light units, so they don't take ludicrous splash from liberators. They can fight better straight up. And my Terran opponent, Rescue Kitty, has made a lot of ghosts. That's kind of his idea about how he wants to approach the late game, his build order, his decision, his macro. Notice his macro has been good. He has many bases, a planetary fortress down here. He's made more command centers. He's trying to take a 5th. He has extra orbitals. He has lots more command centers. He has multiple starports. This guy's very good. He's not really able to do much against the late game Zerg army, though. He's trying to tech to Liberator Ghost. But it's hard to transition out of the mid game and have enough tech lab barracks to really go into Ghost. That's another thing, is you always want to be building enough production facilities. You always want to be building enough production facilities to keep your money down. Notice how I don't just aim move, I micro my banelings by move commanding them into what I want, because they're going... The thing about banelings is you always want to be move commanding them while the rest of your army stampedes through, because the other your Terran opponent will always have to micro. He'll always have to deal with the banelings, and if he doesn't, well, his units are going to kill them and they're going to explode on top of his army. What you don't want to do is blindly A-move banelings and have them crash into buildings. That's a huge waste of money. Notice throughout this game I've been taking bases, I've been transferring workers. I haven't left lots of workers at these second and third bases. I've moved them down to my subsequent bases. Now whenever you make units of Zerg, you should have all of your hatcheries hotkeyed to one key, and as you make them you should hit control on the eggs and then hit shift and then 1 to add the eggs that have just been made to your control group of your army. So whenever you hit 1, you basically just pull up all of your army. You don't want to get in the habit of using the control army hotkey. So to review, you do that by hitting 4 to select your hatcheries, and then S to make your units. Make whatever you want, then hit control, hold it down, and then left click the bottom, and you'll select all of the eggs, and then you'll hit shift 1 to add all of those eggs to the new control group. Notice, even though I'm winning very heavily, I'm trying to not let my money balloon out of control. I'm taking bases. It can be very hard to kill your Terran opponent, especially when they have planetaries, building walls, and liberators. But if you can camp on top of their production and prevent them from really getting any sort of established army out, because once you sit on top of Terran's production, they're pretty screwed. They can't really defend. This is why infestors are so good, because it prevents your Terran opponent from running around infinitely and being obnoxious. Fungal growth is very good for locking people down. And Rescue Kitty GG. So to review, it's very important to continue to expand, upgrades, and take bases while you make workers. After that, you want to try to keep your money as low as you can. Now once you have a huge economy and huge income, it can be hard. But you want to try to make macro hatches, like extra hatcheries to spend your money, and you're never going to be able to hit your queen injects perfectly, so being able to have another hatch to dump the excess energy into is helpful. And you want to remember to upgrade and consistently scout. Also, creep spread is important. Creep spread is honestly part of scouting and your macro and defense, because a good creep spread means that you can defend these outside bases and see attacks at your inside bases coming too. Notice this base has too many drones. Some of these drones should have just been moved off to one of these upcoming bases. So if you enjoyed any of that, subscribe for more.